will be locked for security purposes, and as already mentioned in the slides as you saw before, any questions, please use the chat function. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, but obviously please feel free to post things as we go through, and we'll be picking up those questions ready for the end. I'll be giving you a brief branch overview before I hand over to our fantastic guest speakers, Jonathan Hewish and Amanda Milliner, Dr. Amanda Milliner from Capital People. And we've got one of our branch members, committee members, Anthony Akari, who's going to just take over a couple of slides on the back of Capital's presentation. We'll have a Q&A session and then final remarks and close at 3:30. So just a bit of an update from the branch. So as you know, at the moment, all of our meetings will continue to be virtual until further notice. And obviously, if that is set to change, we will keep you advised of that as much as possible. After today, our next branch event is on the 26th of August, which is contractor management. And then we do have a branch event in September, which is a joint event with the IOSH Merseyside branch on flood bikes. So once that date has been confirmed, please keep an eye out for the committee mailers in your email box and our social media, LinkedIn, etc., to find out the dates and the details. And as always, please let us know through our email address or social media what you found most valuable about our webinars. And if you haven't already and are possibly interested, IOSH do run a mentoring system. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about that, please click on the link or speak to a number of us in the branch committee, as a number of us are already mentors as well, including myself. And before I hand over to our speakers, I'll just do a brief introduction. So warm welcome back to Dr. Amanda Milliner and Jonathan Hewish, who previously ran a session for us back in April on leadership, and we had some excellent feedback on the back of it. So we're really excited for today's presentation on behaviour and culture. Any questions, as already mentioned, please pop them into the chat facility. I'm going to hand you over to our speakers. Thank you very much.
I think we're just about to try and share screen, so our presentation should launch shortly. Bear with us just 2 seconds. I'm hoping that's working. And if we can go into presentation mode, can you all see our screens? Is that a thumbs up? I'm hoping that's all good to go. So yeah, yes. That's all good. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for introducing us, Stephanie, and thank you to everybody for having us back. We were saying earlier, we can't believe it was so long ago as April that we were actually doing the last presentation, the last session with you. Time has once again absolutely flown. The team here today is 4 people. We'll introduce each other in a second, but just a quick run through for anybody new about Capital People. Capital People is a consultancy based in Cardiff. It's a sister company to Capital Law, a commercial law firm. We run a number of strands of activity. We have an HR consultancy. We have obviously a health and safety consultancy. You know Mark Littlejohn well, I believe. He's worked with you for a while. And we have a change consultancy. Alongside that, we have a suite of learning and development programs in the Capital Academy that Amanda leads. And we have a coaching and also a psychometrics function. Been running most of those now for approximately 2 years, but happy to talk further if that's of use to anybody. In terms of the team today, a quick round of introductions. My name is John Hewish. I'm the Chief Executive of Capital People, background in economics and finance and strategy. Over to Amanda to introduce herself.
Hi, so I'm Amanda. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Capital. So I have a background across public and private sector working with top teams. Nice to see you all.
And we're joined today by Alex and Johnny. Alex, do you want to go first?
So yeah, I'm Alex. I'm the HR business partner at Capital People. I've been working there now, coming up to a year, and I've been working in the HR space for about 6-7 years now, basically helping businesses across the public and private sector with their people-related issues.
And I'm hoping Johnny is in. Johnny's just been having some difficulty with his IT. Johnny, are you there? And the silence would suggest he's not. He's having difficulties getting in. He's still trying to join us. Johnny is one of our team. He advises on all things HR, and will hopefully be able to join us for the presentation. That's the team for today. In terms of the session today, very similar to the last one. It's hopefully very interactive, very participative. It's at pace. We're going to ask you to join in. We're going to ask you to put things into the chat lines and to really engage. We're with you for about 40 minutes, which isn't long, but absolutely hope that in the same way as last time, you get some really good learning from it, and we get to have a really good conversation. Last session, we talked about leadership, as Stephanie mentioned. We talked about what leadership meant. Some of the theoretical models around leadership. So we talked about authentic leadership, about ethical leadership. We talked about transformational leadership and what that meant, and some of the conditions, especially related to health and safety and what leadership looks like in that space. Similar approach today. We're going to explore culture and behavior linked to both leadership and health and safety. So hopefully this will build on the session that we did last time. We want to once again explore some of the theoretical models around culture, and we've got a few of those to talk through. We have some quotes in the same way as we did last time, and we'd like to know what that means to you. And we have a breakout session at the end where we're going to hopefully ask you to all really engage, really participate, and get some real feedback about what culture, behaviors, and health and safety in that environment really look like working together. So that's the session for today. If we can start heading into the session itself. I believe Johnny is now in the session. Johnny, can you say hello?
I can. Hello, everyone.
Hello, and welcome to Johnny. Johnny, if you want to say who you are just briefly first, and then over to you.
Sure. Thank you, John. I'm Johnny. I'm a HR advisor at Capital People. I joined in December last year. Prior to that, I worked at Cardiff Council and Cardiff University. So quite a lot of experience within the public sector, and obviously in HR, working quite closely with health and safety as well. So to get us started with this first slide, put simply, organizational culture is the way we do things around here. And it can often sort of come about sort of quite spontaneously. As it says, the culture represents what has happened and worked in the past. So in the first instance, it's formed kind of naturally, but of course then later on, an organization might see the need to alter its culture. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So just to start you off with a little bit of organizational cultural theory. If we start there in the bottom left with the gods of management, this is a theory that Charles Handy came up with, and it sort of separates different cultural styles according to whether they're more or less centralized and whether they are more or less formal. And he based them around 4 of the Greek gods. So we'll start with the first one top left there is Zeus, and he rules with a sort of more centralized but less formal approach. And Zeus kind of represents the power or club culture, which is based on personalities with power and influence coming from a central source, usually the founder or a leader. Moving across then in sort of clockwise direction, we'll go to Apollo, who is more centralized but more formal as well. And this represents a sort of bureaucratic culture. And the underlying presumption here is logic and rationality. So this type of culture would use formal structures and well-defined rules and procedures. Going down then, we've got Athena, who represents a kind of more formal but less centralized approach. And Athena is the goddess of task culture. In this one, management is seen as completing a series of projects or solving problems. And then last but not least, we have Dionysus, who is the god of existential culture. And this is the rarest one, really, the one you're least likely to see. In the other 3 cultures, the individual is subordinate to the organization or the task. Whereas in an existential culture, the organization's sort of purpose is to serve the interests of the individuals within it. And Charles Handy, the author of this approach, he advocates a sort of best fit, so the most effective organizations have an appropriate fit between the individuals, the type of work, the environment, and the culture. John, I think you're on mute.
Once again, I get caught out. Always me. There's always one, and it is always me. Heading now into some quotes from some management theorists around culture. I'm going to hand over here to Alex.
So as you remember last time, we went through a few quotes around leadership and talked around what they meant to us and how you interpreted them. And we find that's an equally useful way of interpreting different attitudes towards culture and organization. So the first one we have is culture eats strategy for breakfast. Simply speaking, to me, that means that you can have the best strategy in the world, everything can be right on paper, but if you don't have the right cultures and behaviors surrounding that, your strategy is never going to take off. In terms of Brian Chesky, so culture is simply a shared way of doing something with a passion. I think this is a good example of how culture can mean totally different things to different organizations, but there's always that central driver behind it all as well, that individual drive, and there's always that element of passion. So, David Cummings, corporate culture is the only sustainable competitive advantage that is completely within the control of the entrepreneur. I think this is a really important one to understand. It's about there's only so much that you can control within your sphere of influence, and culture is one of those really important ones that will drive behaviors, get the right kind of activity happening within the organization, and it is something to specify there, which is in the control of those in power. Number 4, we have Rowan Dredge. So values determine culture, culture determines behavior, and behavior determines outcomes. I think to me, the important thing to take away from this is how values are the core driver behind everything. So with the right set of values in place for your people and your organization, along that chain, you eventually receive the outcomes that you get if you've got the right kind of values in place. So number 5, Michael Cooley, the culture of a company is the sum of the behaviors of all of its people. I think similar to some of the others, this is a really good sort of quote that helps understand how culture is something that can be quite difficult to define, but at the crux of it, it is all about behaviors at an individual and an organizational level. With number 6, your culture is a combination of what you create and what you allow. And again, to me, that's a really good thing about how, as Johnny mentioned earlier, a culture of an organization can kind of form organically, but it's also about giving it the right hand and moving it in the right kind of directions to get to where you want. So moving on now onto the next slide, you'll see the 6 quotes on the screen. I think what would be really good is if you can post in the chat box a number of your favorite quote and a little bit of information about why, and we'll get some conversation going around that.
I particularly like the notion of number 5. To a certain extent, we talked about a quote earlier from Peter Drucker saying, talking about very much culture is the way that you do things around here. The way you do things is very much represented by behaviors. So number 5 speaks directly to that one, which I think is fascinating. So that relationship between culture and behaviors for me is absolutely crystal clear.
Quote 2, health and safety is a passion. Somebody's just commented. That's good to see.
Any other thoughts coming through? Any favorite quotes?
How you behave when you think no one is looking.
Oh, that's not just scaffolders. How fabulous. Yeah, absolutely. Has to be a consequence for not having the right culture. And it's interesting, isn't it? There's a conversation about what the right culture is. That distance between how you like to do things and how you should do things is an important question. And one of the things that we get asked a lot is how you help people link how you like to do things with how you should, and move from one to the other, that notion of cultural change linked to behavioural change.
6 is quite popular with lots of you.
I was going to say, it's interesting that there certainly seems to be a couple that really resonate more than others.
Lots coming in for 4, 5 and 6, it looks like.
Yeah.
They definitely seem to be the more popular ones. Consequence of actions define the culture. Keep do what you do, you keep getting what you get.
I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Very good.
absolutely. I like that one. 5s and 6 coming in again. 4s, 5s, 6s. Okay, I think we're probably getting, no, all of them for me, a combination of all of these for a successful culture. Okay, on the basis of that, please do keep typing in there, but on the basis of us and moving at pace, we're going to keep going if that's okay. Happy as always to take questions either through chat or afterwards, or whatever is useful, and always happy to talk outside of the event as well. Okay. The next one. So this is over to me a little bit, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the models of culture, the theories of culture that have been around for a little while and are well known. So the Handy's dimensions of power is what Johnny was talking about earlier, but this is just representing it a different way. Rather than the matrix, this talks about the different dimensions that Johnny talked about the influence of power in an organization, how centralized things are, how directed things might be. A focus around roles. So, for example, around health and safety, around accountancy, whatever that might be, around engineering, around development. Is it organized around tasks, about doing specific things? And the program elements, perhaps? Or is it organized around person and personality? Won't go too far with that. Johnny talked about that brilliantly earlier, and as our philosopher king, he knows far more about that than I do, so I'll always defer to Johnny around that one. The next one I'll talk to is the model on the left, which is Hofstede and his cultural dimensions. You'll notice that there's definitely some crossover between the two. The first one at the top in the yellow circle, and I'll start there and then go clockwise around, is about power distance. So Hofstede talked about differences in organization based on how much power is held at the top of the organization and how much power is distributed to individuals throughout the organization. So you could think about that as empowerment, as distributed leadership that we talked about at the last session. Another one, is it about individual or the collective? So is this about a personality-based individual lead from the front kind of organization? Or is this one where people come together to work routes through? Co-produce is a new word that's been around for a while that people have started to talk about. Is it and this is possibly an older style description. As I say, Hofstede has been around for a while. Is it a masculine versus feminine culture? So is it very driven? Is it almost to the point of aggressiveness? Or is it one which is much more collaborative and empathetic in style? The next one going around, so I'm now at the bottom of that circle in orange, uncertainty avoidance. So is the organization one that takes on risks willingly, or is it one that's more risk averse? Is it one that takes and builds around strategic risk? So there's lots of questions that come in there in terms of organizations. Moving round further, is it long versus short term? So when you make decisions, do you just think about what the next step is? Or do you think more about what the next 10, 20 years is? When I started thinking about and working in business theory, one of the big models around this was the Japanese model, which used to talk about 100-year cycles for strategic planning. I don't think they do that anymore. I think that might have changed a little bit, but definitely that difference between, is it the next step or is it the next 3-year plan? And then Another interesting phrase, is it about indulgence or is it about restraint? And actually, I think this now talks more about control mechanisms. How much delegation do you have in organizations? How much control do the systems give you, or how much freedom do they give you? Since we've been working remotely in COVID, actually that indulgence side has increased. And actually, I guess one of the questions is, when you do Zoom, do you wear pajamas? Let's not go there today. So that's a very different model that Hofstede's cultural dimensions. The model on the right, Johnson and Scholes, is one of the more popular models of cultural analysis. And it's been a core part of MBAs for a long, long time. What it says is that all of the elements around the outside of that circle combine together to create what they call a cultural paradigm, or translated, how we do things around here. And it's made up of a series of different things. Once again, I'll go around in order. So at the top of the screen, I'll call that a combination of green and yellow, or olive, perhaps. I'm not quite sure. Colors not being my thing. Stories. So what are the stories that get told in organizations? The story about the chief exec having the biggest office, or don't ever cross the chief exec because things will go wrong, versus the story that says, actually, the chief exec is the most engaging person that talks to everybody in the organization. The symbols. Actually, a good symbol is the size of the chief exec's office, perhaps. Does the chief exec have the biggest office in the building? Is that a sign of power? Is that a sign of authority? Power structures itself. So do you have a huge hierarchy in your organization with lots and lots of levels, and with power in terms of delegation totally at the top of the organization, so that anybody who's further down the organization actually gets very little ability to do things themselves, versus a much more empowered system? That talks directly into the organizational structure itself. Is it a flat structure? Is it I think Johnny talked earlier about a more chaotic version of that, which is more project-based. How is the organizational structured? The control systems, we've talked about that before. Are there strong schemes of delegation? Do you get lots of latitude, or do you get little? And then rituals and routines. And this is almost the translation of all of the other elements into one space. So rituals, routines, how we do things around here. Yes, we come in at 9 o'clock on the dot. Yes, we check in. Yes, we have lunch at 12 to 1. Yes, we have whatever it might be. And at 11 o'clock, we stop for 10 minutes to read the newspapers. Whatever those routines might be, what do they look like? But between all of those, they start to inform how we do things around here. Are we risk averse? Are we a blame culture, or are we a learning organization? Do we share? Do we come together at regular points in the day to have conversation? Do we communicate lots or communicate very little? Lots of this is based around that notion of a cultural paradigm. It has its detractors. There are people who see it as far too formulaic. There are people who absolutely love it. Once again, for all of these, I describe them as different models. And actually, what you need to do is to find the model that helps you think about your context and your organization the most, and actually that thing that enables you to build the culture that you need. We have a question coming in. Is there a potential danger of cultural paradigm, the way we do things? Accidents and incidents and unsafe behavior could be permitted to arise. Yes, absolutely, there is a potential of that. What you need to think about alongside that is the organization allowed to learn and to adapt, and is that encouraged and rewarded? So for example, do you have an innovation wall that says, yes, we've seen things not work well, here's a new way of doing it, and is that encouraged and is it taken on board? Is improvement allowed in an organization, or are you absolutely constrained by a set of rules, which is one cultural thing, and the person who has all of the power at the top of the organization doesn't allow it to shift? So actually what you get is an element of reinforcement across the whole of the cultural spectrum. Okay, no further questions have come in on that. Absolutely happy to take more later and to talk through, as I said. We're going to move now into the next section, which is this.
Which is me again. So we're going to go back into the comments section, back into the chat. So we'd like you to type in sort of 3 to 5 words that you think would describe a positive culture for health and safety. So if you can pop the words that you think are most appropriate or that would lead to the best culture, pop those in the chat, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion around them.
Nice to see empowerment at the front end, especially at this current time. Learning, listening, sharing. Mark, could you say what AFR is so everybody else knows? Psychological safety, that's one that's been heavily thought through over the last period of time.
Accident frequency rate.
Thank you, Mark. Brilliant. I'm going to let somebody else pick that one up. Recognition, accountability, empowerment there again, collaboration, honesty is coming through lots, empowerment, responsibility, engagement and involvement, commitment, that's a very good word. One of the things, this takes us back to the transformational leadership model we talked about back in April, and 3 of the core elements of that were that values and vision should be shared, owned, and understood, but the central part of that was that they were all owned and committed to, so that's really good. Fostering, partnering, and the climate, really good. Focused, opens, listens, and engages. What we're going to try and do separately is to capture lots of these words afterwards and come back with a word cloud, so you can see the words that came through most strongly for you. But lots and lots of commonality between those, really positive. Johnny, any thoughts from you?
Yes, well, I noticed that the kind of collaboration and communication seem to be quite popular words as well, which is always good. I think that's the key part of culture, isn't it? If we're all working together, we need to be in contact with each other and to understand each other's views and ideas and perspectives. So I think that's really interesting. Alex,
what are you hearing?
I think it's really good that we're seeing accountability, ownership, responsibility. And I think especially in a health and safety culture as well, that really drives it into that individual element of ownership and the responsibility of just people within the organization. It's understanding that it is about that overarching piece, but it brings the individual into play as well.
And Amanda, any thoughts? What's coming through for you?
Empowerment, that's really jumping out at me, and that felt leadership, so strong leadership and empowering others, I think is really strong.
2 things that have come out for me in the last few comments, actually. One is the not working in isolation, which goes with the collaboration, and I know some have found that challenging over the last period, and one of the things we're getting asked a lot at the moment is about what a return into a new version of an agile workspace looks to, a hybrid between working at the office and working remotely, but actually how you build welfare into that and well-being into that for individuals. The other one I love seeing is learning, because for me that's about not just the organization learning and individuals and teams developing within that, but actually that's about improvement and change and culture developing over time as well. And that one that's just come through from Mark about valuing people, valuing input and positive feedback, absolutely brilliant. It's that positive reinforcement that does allow culture and behavior to change. They're still coming through, absolutely fantastic. Please do once again keep doing that. But in the interest of time, and we've promised to be 45 minutes, I'm going to ask if we can move forward to the next item, if that's okay. And I think on the basis that this is a technical piece, we're going to hand over to Team IOSH.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Anthony Akari here from the IOSH committee. Because we're talking a little bit about culture and leadership, there's a really important document that's around called INDG 417, which is Leading Health and Safety at Work, which is actions for directors, board members, business owners, and organizations of all sizes. Leaders at all levels need to understand the range of health and safety risks in their part of the organization and to give proportionate attention to each of them. Now, for those of you who are familiar with HSG 65, HSG 65 was standing alone in terms of telling people a good framework that they could use. In 2013, the INDG document aligned itself with the HSG 65, so that the Plan, Do, Check, Act diagram we see on the slide was brought in line with the Plan, Do, Check, Act slide in the HSG 65 booklet. And so what they've aligned is the managing for health and safety as a process directly with actions that the lead in health and safety at work document directs. And that was produced by the Institute of Directors and HSE a number of years ago, but as I said, it was revised in 2013. If you haven't had a chance to read it, get your copy of Managing for Health and Safety, the HSG 65, and download your Leading Health and Safety at Work document, INDG 417, and read them both together. And that will give you a good framework for how leadership should be working in terms of health and safety within your organization. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of leading health and safety as a business, it's important that those who own, run and manage the businesses protect employees and members of the public who might be affected by their activities. And really, leading health and safety is an essential part of risk management. And if we don't get commitment from board, senior directors and senior management, then it's a bit of a problem, because otherwise the rest of us are just getting involved, doing our day-to-day thing without any real backup from leadership in terms of managing safely. And failure to include health and safety as a key business risk in board decisions can be catastrophic. And within the Leading Health and Safety at Work booklet, there's some really good examples with a case study from Sainsbury's and a case study from a few other organisations as well. Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service, British Sugar, and North Staffordshire Combined NHS Trust. So there's some good case studies to look at there. Health and safety law places duties on organisations and employers and directors personally. So if you're working for a small business, it's worth bringing this document to their attention if they haven't seen it already. It's crucial that our senior managers lead and promote health and safety, not just us as safety professionals, so that we've got backing whenever we try to make changes within an organisation. So you can see INDG 417 and HSG 65 on the website. So that's enough about how we can look at documents that will support us developing leadership for health and safety at a senior level. What I wanted to do now is, if we move on to the next slide, is talk to you a little bit about the competency framework and professional standards, so that this is the professional standards for safety and health at work that IOSH are introducing and will hopefully be with us next year. Now, there's a large number of competencies, as we've been made aware of in previous branch meetings, but what I wanted to do is just give you a little bit of a flavour on the core competencies in section 8 of the document, which are the core competencies. And if you can see in the bottom left quadrant, just past half past, so you see leadership and management. And within the leadership and management, there are 6 areas of competency, so that as safety professionals progressing through the IOSH grades, we really need to be getting to grips with these on a personal basis. So whilst the INDG 417 and HSG 65 talk about leadership and management for directors and senior managers, this is for us as leaders for safety. So within the leadership and management element, we've got functional management, visible leadership, teamwork, project management, managing change, and conflict management. So again, if you don't have a copy of the document, what I'll do is make sure that it's uploaded so that you can get it from the notes from branch. but you should be able to get it from your own membership with IOSH on www.iosh.com. But if you have any difficulties getting the competency framework, get in touch with myself or one of the other branch committee and we'll get it to you. So leading health and safety, read your HSG 65, INDG 417 and your IOSH professional standards for safety and health at work competency framework, and that will give you a good starting point if you're new to an organization to take things forward, or if you're well established in your existing organization, it'll give you something that you can cross-reference manager skills and your own personal skills against. So that's just a brief summary of the core competencies around leadership and management. Thanks. So back to you, Jonathan.
John, you're on mute.
One day, that's twice. I'm trying to be good and it's not working. So what you've seen so far, and this takes us back to the session in April, we've talked a bit about leadership and what that starts to look like at a concept level. Today, we've started to look at culture, the relationship between leadership, culture, and behaviors. And we've just started to have a look at the connection between that and behaviors and health and safety. So I'm going to hand over to Johnny now, who's going to introduce the next section and send us into our participative part.
John, yeah, so the next section you'll be going into breakout rooms, and we're going to set you this question for you to discuss in your groups. So the question is, if behaviors are the desired enactment of culture, what do we need to do to ensure that they are owned, enacted, and embedded? So if sort of behaviors are the sort of manifestation, if you like, of your organizational culture, how do you make sure that you've got those right behaviors in your organization? And in your breakout groups, if you could please nominate one lucky person to feedback at the end and give us a summary of your discussion and of your thoughts. I think we're putting you in the breakout rooms for about 10 minutes to discuss. So then in 10 minutes time, we'll see you all again and see how you got on.
See you all soon, folks. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Do we have everyone back? That's the next question. Are all the groups back in?
Yes, John, yeah.
Fabulous. Okay, in which case, thank you very much for that. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to hand you to Johnny to get some feedback.
Yeah, as John said, hope you all enjoyed that. I hope you found it an interesting chance to have a discussion around those behaviours and how to embed them. I'm not sure how many groups we have. If we start with group 1, if you'd like to give us a bit of feedback about how your discussion went, some of the key themes that came out of them.
Does everybody know what groups they were in, to be fair?
Oh,
I think the breakout rooms would have been numbered.
Yeah.
the question is, did anybody notice what room they were in when they went into them? That's the question.
I think I was number 5.
And I was group 8.
Oh wow, we've got lots of.
I think I was 3.
I was 4.
I was 3.
Well, perhaps if anyone wants to volunteer then. If,
Well, in group 1, sorry, there was it Clyde, Ian, Matthew, Sally, Trevor, Wayne? I think they were in room 1. Any of you guys?
Volunteers?
Hello there, it's Wayne Watson. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks,
Yeah,
Wayne.
okay. I'm not sure if I was the Wayne, but some of those names I didn't recognise, so I should speak anyway. Funny enough, none of us could remember the question we were asked because none of us took a note of it. So what we did discuss was generally the size of the organisations and the messaging and communication from the top. So as an example, when one of the directors or project teams or whoever it need be say, I need it doing, but doing safely, do they mean do it safely and if you can't do it safely, don't do it? Or do they mean do it, but try and do it safely? So it's just the messaging really, where we feel that senior leaders, including us as a profession, what message we give to people and how they understand that message and then take that on board. So messaging and communication, we felt, we discussed that was something we need to be really careful about and really clear about. So it's sort of aligned to the question, so we weren't miles away.
No. Yeah, and it's a very important point, as has come up a few times in the session. Communication, understanding what each other means, it's really crucial. So that's great. Thank you for that, Wayne, and group 1. Anyone from group 2 care to offer some thoughts?
That was Sean, Brill. That was your group. That was your group, Sean.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute. I get to say it.
And I clicked the right button and then I clicked the wrong one. So Julia, I didn't write any notes down, but one thing we spoke about, having the right culture within the business. So I'm cultural lead for Network Rail at the moment, and we spoke about people talk about having a safety culture, but the analogy that I'm using currently is around having the right culture in the business. So making sure that there's the right financial culture, making sure it's the right sort of timetable culture, the right ethics culture, the right safety culture, and putting all those into sort of a mixture like a cake. And if one of those is missing, then you won't get the right culture. We spoke about that. Julia, I'm going to lean on yourself because I know you were scribbling notes down.
Yeah, but I thought your analogy was brilliant, Sean. It was about visible leadership and having a hybrid, re-evaluating the role of leadership and being more informed. Roles have changed from a health and safety advisor point of view, and it's about having strong behaviours, and the health and safety advisors being leading by example and promoting behaviours which are shared by the management team. We did talk about telling stories. Just because we've always done it that way, it doesn't mean to say we need to keep doing it that way. And I suppose it's just bringing everybody on board and leading the conversation, leading the safety conversation.
And I also think, Julia, we spoke about having a visible leadership. didn't we? Rather than somebody who hides behind the screen. So we've all been on Zoom and Teams and whatever other platform for the last 20 months, and it's about switching those cameras on, isn't it? Rather than sitting there just because you've got your, as you said earlier, Jonathan, just because you've got your pajamas on doesn't mean that you can't put your camera on. So yeah, it's interesting. So that was our feedback. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. That's a wonderful analogy there about the cake. Really like that. That's brilliant. Anyone from group 3?
Yeah, that was Tudor. That was your room. I think anybody took some notes from that.
Okay, yeah, that was us. We looked at things that can compete against establishing a culture and undermine it as well as support it. So one of the things that came up was to have an essential transparency of the leadership team. They would be visible and supportive. There were certain things about obstacles and removing obstacles in terms of effective leadership. This can be a bit of a battle if there's an old culture or an old established culture when you want to change. One thing that was mentioned about avoiding double standards, people saying one thing and doing another, that can be quite undermining in respect of a culture. You want people to lead by example, but then you don't want them to be finger pointing when it goes wrong. Some other views was making certain that the employer is seen to take the establishment of particularly a health and safety culture seriously. Sizes of a business can be important. The difference between family-run businesses and large corporate businesses that can prove difficult in some cases. And also someone said performance can be a burden. In other words, how do we want to be seen to measure our performance? And if that's important to establishing whether we achieve a good health and safety culture, we can only do so much. Don't make it too much of a burden, but make certain if we are going to measure it, make people understand what those measurements are, and don't use it as a stick to beat people with. Okay, thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Judy. Yeah, some great points in there. I'm conscious that it's now 3 o'clock and we're taking up more of your time than we promised we would. But if anyone from any of the other groups has any additional thoughts that they wanted to share.
Yeah, we in group 5, we sort of lead, the whole thing about buying from the top we discussed, and that visible commitment. But we also talked about stakeholders and identifying who those people are. They might not just be staff, they might be volunteers, they may be union reps, and identifying those and engaging with those as well. We talked a lot about communication and knowing your workforce on how best to achieve that. So, if you've just got managers as your eyes and ears, not everyone's going to go to a manager with the little niggly stuff. So how else can you tease that information out through health and safety reps or face-to-face meetings? We talked about different portals and elements for engaging, and not only having the hard lines and the stick approach, but the carrot, the encouraging, the supporting and recognizing where performance has been good, either collectively or individually. And we talked about how, from a communication point of view and engagement point of view, how breaking down the barriers of health and safety, a lot of people are almost a little bit scared of it. You talk to people about risk assessments and stuff, and just maybe perhaps to understanding or the formality of it, people get turned off. So how you can really engage. And we did talk about that ultimately you can have really good behaviours and people wanting to be involved, but if the actual safety isn't right, so the precautions, if they're not there, then people aren't going to feel safe, they aren't going to buy in. So the climate needs to be there from a structure point of view, and the safe systems of work, and then the behaviours come alongside it then.
Thank you.
From group 8, we've just got a couple of brief points. One of the team felt that the management that they were working with were looking for the cheapest, most quick and the fastest way of gaining some safety training online without real commitment to it, and felt that a process of education might be more appropriate for some managers that rather than just training. Communication needed to be two-way within the management structure, workforce up to management and back. And finally, an interesting point from one of the team was in terms of trying to develop a culture, develop, agree, and implement a set of values as a start point. So that was from Group 8.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Anthony. And thanks to
Can I just add in from Group 9, just the last, everything else we've pretty much agreed with. So it's all down to commitment, buy-in, communication, trust. Couple of things that have been occurring to me just as I've been listening to the other group. We're still talking about safety culture. And I think the main thing that businesses need to look at nowadays is it's not just safety culture, it's the whole business culture, because it pervades your whole approach to risk management in general, your approach to how you deal with staff, not just in terms of safety or health or the areas that IOSH tend to look at, but it's a much broader aspect. And if we forget that, we're going to become siloed, and that's not going to be good for us as a profession or the people that we are aiming to help.
Just for clarity, can I add a few comments from Group 7 as well? I won't add many there. There's been an awful lot covered already, which is good. So positive recognition definitely was one of the main ones, and getting ownership and buy-in from people, particularly when building safe systems of work. And trying to instill, as a good point that was made in the group, try and instill like a seed of an information and make people sort of develop that seed, so they think that they've almost thought of it themselves, and then it's going to help to get a lot of good buy-in into safe systems of work, making it personal. And I think a real major one for me in terms of health and safety, because it's still got quite a bad press and considered to be quite a negative business aspect, really, when it's not. But trying to make it fun and engaging as much as we can, because it can be boring. I think we all know that, and just trying to make it as engaging and fun as possible within the realms of keeping it professional, obviously.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you, Andrew. And thanks to all of you for your feedback.
Sorry, John, if I can just jump in, I think it's important that Group 4 can get theirs in as well. Great discussion. I think to begin with, it was clear that we need clear expectations of what is needed to be established. We then followed up by clear, open, honest, two-way communication, where leaders demonstrating action right from the outset and carrying that through. And that's not just leaders from the management structure, if you like, that's leaders at all levels. So it's a hierarchical, process from start to finish. We had talked about listening, empowering, having a formality to the procedures, consistency in standards, and maintaining those standards throughout a project life cycle right through to the end, when push comes to shove, that the health, safety and well-being is not compromised. Ownership and empowerment, inclusivity is important, and positive leadership at all levels, as well as trust, and rewarding the positives and recognizing the challenges. So that was from Group 4.
Wonderful. Brilliant. Anybody else have anything else to add to that? No. In which case, then I'll hand back to Jonathan to finish us off, as it were.
Thank you very much, Johnny. And can I just say thank you to everybody. That's one of the most engaged sessions we've seen. Absolutely brilliant. And Andrew, can I just say, health and safety isn't boring. You want to see me do a leadership session that lasts a week? That's boring. Can I just say, in terms of the session, it goes back to what I was saying a little while ago. We've gone through an awful lot of content in a very short period of time. We've talked about the relationship between leadership, which you've all come full circle to, which was the original session that we did. We've talked about culture in all its shapes and forms. Importantly, within that, you've drawn out in the last couple of sessions as well, the breakout sessions, that central importance of communication and engagement. And also that piece that talks about health and safety and its culture really needed to be embedded, not as at the side of an organization, but as part of the DNA of everything that it does, so that it's everybody's responsibility. Yes, board might set a tone. Yes, health and safety might create the framework itself, but actually it needs to be something that everybody owns all the way through. And that narrative is really, really important. I think you've done brilliantly. So can I just say, conscious that we have overrun, I'd like to say it was us talking lots, but actually you've been so engaged. Really been a privilege to work with you today around this. I'm going to hand over now, but can I firstly thank my team as well for all that they've done. Our team's been absolutely phenomenal. Johnny, Alex, Amanda, I have to say, they just let me turn up and talk, which is brilliant. They do all of the structuring and all the work behind the scenes. So thank you to all of those. It's a pleasure to work as a team with these. So absolutely fantastic. And thanks to you once again for letting us join you. We are happy to take questions after the event. I'm conscious that we've overrun already. So if there's any questions subsequently, please do send them through, and delighted to support you going forwards and anything else that we can do to help. So on behalf of the Capital team, absolutely, thank you very, very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Another fantastic session from the Capital People team. Thank you very, very much. All of you very engaging yourselves. I have asked for anyone to pop any questions into the chat box. That I haven't seen any coming through, but if any do come through, please feel to unmute and ask away. I suppose while we're just waiting for some questions to come through, just on the back of Anthony's section with regards to the competency framework, I will repop the link in the chat anyway. But have a look, and even just from a CPD perspective, maybe have a look at some of the competencies and tease out, is there anything that particularly stuck with you today? Anything that you're coming away from the session with, and use that as part of your CPD. So tie it in, and let's just start getting into the mindset of the IOSH competency framework. I think it definitely wouldn't hurt.
Steph?
Yeah.
Just looking through the chat from earlier on, we have one question outstanding right from the beginning, from Simon Rosser, who asks, can you own a great culture as you're only responsible if there's a bad one?
Ooh.
So my sense around that would be, are you only responsible for a bad one? Number one, I think you can be responsible because it's partly the people who are in the organization that also create a good culture. Obviously, a good culture depends on its context and what the organization is. But the other thing that we can all take responsibility for is helping improve a culture and to change a culture. We all role model behaviors. We all talk to others and communicate with others. So just, and that's a personal viewpoint, absolutely happy to be challenged around that. But I think that personally, we're all partly responsible for the culture that we co-create all the time. And it's up to us how we choose to move that forward.
I'd ask the question. I think you're right. It's everybody owns an excellent culture, but it's a minority are the ones that own a toxic one or a transformational one because they're in the process of changing it. So that was really what I was leading to.
Yeah, absolutely understand where you're coming from.
Thank you for that, Simon.
Thoughts or questions?
Dylan, was there anything else? Any other questions you've noticed?
No, not at present.
Okay.
Or once again, as always, happy to take them afterwards, happy to respond, and would be delighted to come and talk to you all again if we haven't bored you already. Obviously, make sure that you can drop us an email, the Southfield branch, or drop us a line on LinkedIn if there is anything that pops into your brain or after the event, as Jonathan's just said.
Shall I start sharing again?
Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in which case, Team Capital will bid you farewell for today. Thank you once again for having us, and see you all shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
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 It's an absolute pleasure to have the Capital People team here again. I think I can just notice in some of the feedback that's coming through in the chat box, nothing but really, really positive feedback and praise. I think the chat function, the breakout rooms work really, really well. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you to our fantastic speakers. For those who aren't as part of the Southworth branch, thank you for coming today, and we look forward to welcoming you all back to our future meetings. Keep an eye on the committee mailer, keep an eye on our LinkedIn to find out our upcoming events and what's happening. And if possible, please take the time to complete the short post-event survey, only because, you know, we want to continue providing the best possible events for you. So your feedback is well and truly valued, and does help us in terms of what we look to deliver for you and our members going forward. Stay safe, stay well, and ultimately stay connected. Have a good afternoon. Thank you very much. Just on the screen there, we've just popped all of our links, our socials, and we look forward to seeing you next time.